Hey there, folks. It's Scott once again, and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about the two airplane films. The first one and the second one, Airplane 2, the sequel, as it's called. Been meaning to do them for a while, but I just haven't gotten around to them, and I wasn't as energized, and now I'm a hell of a lot more energized. And here we go. The very classic and quintessential comedy of all time, Airplane, of the 1980s, I should say. And this is the Don't Call Me Shirley edition. Has some nice extras, but they're structured a certain way, which I thought was odd, and I have yet to even watch that, but, I'm sure they're nice and all that. This film is on Blu-ray, but I don't have it. From what I understood, from what I can understand, it probably looks nice. The sequel is also on Blu-ray too, but that's for another story. And this film is definitely, still a classic to this day, because it's nearly 40 years old, and I highly doubt they'll ever make another film like this, because, it's very un-PC, filled with satirical humor, visual gags and puns, and slapstick comedy of its nature, and it's a classic. I'll probably talk about what made me laugh and all that stuff, but this film was done by the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams. They would go on to do the Naked Gun films. They, of course, wrote and directed this film. I'll get to the cast and crew here. And the film was produced by Jon Davison. Apparently this was based on Flight into Danger. I don't know if that's a short story or some kind of theatrical production that this film was based on. But anywho, we'll get to our actors. Robert Hayes plays Ted Stryker. He's been in so many films. Probably the most notable I remember was probably Homeward Bound. He was in Stephen King's Cat's Eye. He's been in some other roles too. Like he was on a short-lived TV series based on the movie Starman, which I believe lasted one season. I have yet to see it, but I hear it's pretty good. And then we have and Ted Hayes also appeared. Or not Ted Hayes, sorry. Robert Hayes appeared in another satirical comedy called Superhero Movie that's also had Leslie Nielsen in it too, and of course Leslie Nielsen's in this film, but they never interacted. But anyways, Julie Hagerty plays, the love interest and ex-girlfriend of Ted Stryker, Robert Hayes' character, Elaine Dickinson. Then you have Leslie Nielsen as Dr. Rumack. This was like actually his first intro into comedy because he did a lot of drama-related stuff and of that nature, and he would go into be pretty much a whole lot of comedies throughout the 80s and 90s. And then Peter Graves as Captain Clarence Ovar, or whatever you pronounce his last name. He was in some TV stuff like the original Mission Impossible, and apparently it's late 80s revival as well. I believe he's sadly no longer with us anymore, unfortunately. Same with Leslie Nielsen. Robert Stack is also in this film as Captain Rex Kramer. He's sadly no longer with us. Same with Lloyd Bridges as Steve McCrosky. He's no longer with us anymore as well. And what's his face? Steven Stucker as the highly overzealous, larger-than-life character as the air traffic controller Johnny Henshaw Jacobs. And apparently, you also have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as Roger Murdoch, one of the co-pilots. I believe he was a real-life basketball player and tried to bridge his way into acting. And then apparently the Barbara Beansley was the Jive Lady, which I'll get to the little satirical humor and puns. And you have a pretty solid cast. I believe the first 5 cast members would return for the sequel, and pretty much all the other ones didn't. Well, I take it back. One of them, I forget. Gosh, I don't remember. I know that one other cast member would come back. It was the lady that was always hysterical. But anywho, the film score was done by Elmer Bernstein. I believe he would later do the score for Ghostbusters. The cinematography was done by Joseph Barak, edited by Patrick Kennedy. Production company was Paramount Pictures, and distributed by Paramount Pictures. It came out July of '80, and the film's pretty short. It's just under 90 minutes. It's like an hour and 27 minutes. So it's short, sweet, and really entertaining. So, and the budget in the box office was pretty good. I mean, the budget was only like $3.5 million. Sorry, my nose is itching. And worldwide gross was 130 million. Majority of it was the 83 million, the domestic gross. So did very well, and that's why it would eventually get a sequel. And so getting to the plot, we basically have our main characters of Ted Stryker, played by Robert Hayes, is doing his best to win back Elaine, despite the fact that he's a traumatized war veteran turned taxi driver. My nose is itching again, and I'm sorry about that. Anyways, he has a pathological fear of flying, a drinking problem, not the usual drinking problem. He's been unable to hold a responsible job, and apparently this has affected his relationship with Elaine, who's Julie Hagerty's character. She's now a flight attendant, and she's doing her whatever she can, to get to board her assigned flight from LA to Chicago, and also eventually get the Atlanta flight. And despite Ted's attempts to try to win her back, even though he's getting a ticket and ends up getting the same flight, it's to no avail, and she continues to reject him. And after all the passengers and crew are on the way en route to Chicago, after consuming the in-flight meal, a majority of all the passengers and the flight crew pretty much fall ill because of the consumption of fish that's been apparently given them that's poisoning them and affecting them in ways. Apparently, the only people that have yet to even haven't consumed the fish, which is Ted, Elaine, one of the other flight attendants, and Dr. Rumack. And eventually, Dr. Rumack, which is Leslie Nielsen's character, the fish is definitely have been the cause of all the food poisoning. Like one lady starts, spouting, feeling sick to the stomach and starts spouting out eggs and all of that. One of the crew members start to sweat and starts to have convulsions and spasms and uncontrollable flatulence, which is the captain. Stuff of that nature. And apparently, since there isn't really, Elaine tries to do her best to try to maintain the flight and maintain the airplane within livable distance. She even radios the Chicago control tower for help and is instructed by the tower supervisor, Steve McCroskey, which is Lloyd Bridges' character, and basically she has to activate the autopilot, which is a large inflatable pilot doll named Otto, but he's not able to get them to Chicago because he's not reliable, and actually he even starts to even deflate at one point, and Lane has to inflate him back, but I'll get to one of the visual gags on that later. Unfortunately, like I said before, the pilot doll is not going to be able to get him to Chicago. Elaine and Dr. Rumack realize that the only person with any kind of flight experience is Ted, and then whenever this information is revealed to Steve, he contacts Ted's former commanding officer, Rex Kramer, who's now serving as a commercial pilot, so he can attempt to talk to Ted to land the plane. And Ted becomes troubled when Rex starts to give instructions, apparently because of the falling out they had and apparently their dislike for each other, and because of being given these instructions, he starts to stress out and basically lose all his confidence and decides he can't do this, and he actually grabs the inflatable doll Otto and puts him back in the captain's seat. So, and despite all that, apparently Elaine and then eventually Dr. Rumack, who is really the culprit, he's able to booster and convince Ted to take the controls, and this boosts Ted's confidence, and he resumes the pilot control under Rex's guidance. And as the plane, nears Chicago, the weather becomes more harsh. There's rain, ice, and stuff like that. And with Elaine's help as the co-pilot and with Rex's guidance, he's able to, believe it or not, land the plane safely, and the passengers are not killed. They only suffer minor injuries. And believe it or not, even before it lands, somehow the landing gear ends up getting sheared off. Eventually, all the passengers are unloaded, and rescue vehicles come to help assist the passengers. And despite all this, impressed by the courage, Elaine embraces and kisses him, and this eventually rekindles the relationship. Then apparently somehow the autopilot Otto is able to take control of the plane and starts to take off, and then this also inflates a female companion, and Ted and Elaine start to notice it and wave off in the distance. So that's how it ends. So yeah, this film is filled with so much, satirical humor, visual puns, and gags. There's so many to really talk about. I don't know if I can remember every single one of them, but like in the very beginning, like whenever the passengers are arriving at the airport, there's like this terminal announcements of this male and female, where about the white zone or the red zones is meant for unloading of passengers and basically the passengers and all their belongings, and basically the lady says the white zone's for that, and the guy's like, "Don't start your white zone shit again, Betty," and he's like, "Oh, you want me to get an abortion because of that?" And he's like, "It's only the sensible thing to do. It doesn't even hurt," or something like that. just so insensitive. And then whenever the pilot, the captain, which is Captain Clarence Oliver, he's reading something like it says sperm donor, and then when he has to make a contact by phone, he grabs the white phone, or no, I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of the phones. He's like, "No, it's the white phone." He's like, "Sorry." And he's like, he tries to talk to the Mayo Clinic, and there's a guy behind them. There's like a fuckload of Mayo behind him. It's unbelievable. And apparently the Mayo Clinic is trying to tell him about this certain passenger that needs a heart transplant. And there's actually a heart there, and the heart's like jumping up and all that stuff. It's unbelievable. And then when Ted, decides he has to get a ticket on the same flight as Elaine, the one of the, I don't know if it's the attendant, but the flight, the person that asks him smoking or non-smoking, and he says smoking, and apparently he grabs a ticket and it's literally smoking. And then apparently these guys, these black dudes, they're all talking a certain language of jive, and there's like subtitles beneath there trying to give them what they really are talking about. And then whenever one of them gets sick during the flight, they try to talk to the one flight attendant. She can't understand them, and then the old lady, which is Barbara Billingsley character, steps in and says, "I speak jive." And then whenever the jive lady tells her what this person is really sick and needs help, she tells him, "Don't worry, she'll keep you on the rebound." He's like, and the guy's like, "Yo, my mama, don't be fooling," or something like that, and she's like, "Cut me some slack, Jack." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you don't want the help, Jack? Don't get the help. This Jack fool don't got no brains anyway." Just funny, just all funny, and just all filled with gags. And basically, whenever the Leslie Nielsen's character is introduced, basically whenever he tries to help that one sick lady, which even though when she gets sick, there's like eggs starting to form in her mouth. He has to take one out. Then apparently another one comes about. He has to take that one out, and then the third one forms. And then when he grabs that one, I believe he cracks the egg, and apparently a chick flies out of it. And then apparently there's whenever the Dr. Rumack's character has to go back in the cockpit because of the fact that the autopilot was failing. Apparently it deflates, and she has to grab the hose, and which is at the belt buckle. And whenever Leslie Nielsen's character comes in, it looks like she's giving the fucking autopilot a blowjob or something like that. And he's like, he turns back around, and then whenever somehow the autopilot's all nice and inflated, apparently the scene pulls back and reveals that they're both smoking a cigarette with kind of like a distinct smile on the face. And hell, whenever she was trying to blow more air back into him, he was like smiling a certain way. Gosh, it's so funny. And then apparently whenever the famed line, the "Don't Call Me Shirley" edition, where Dr. Rumack has to convince Ted that he was the only chance that this plane has, and he's like, "Well, Shirley, you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley." And how even whenever Ted's working on something, he's like, Shirley, you can't be, Shirley, you gotta be joking. And he's like, "Yeah, don't call me Shirley again," or something like that, which is hilarious. And then Lloyd Bridges' character, whenever he comes in, And whenever he has to, gosh, now I can't believe I forgot about this. Like, this is the time that I had to quit smoking, or when at the time I had to quit, amphetamines, and he's taking amphetamines, and this is the time that I should have stopped sniffing glue, and he starts to sniff glue, and he's so really high up. Apparently, he ends up like jumping off into the window or something whenever the plane's on its way over, which is hilarious. And then apparently, what makes this film funny is that the fact the majority of these actors never really did a comedy, but they're supposed to play it straight by the dialogue, and that's what makes this funny. Like the "Don't call me Shirley" line, and whenever another example when Dr. Rumack's character is talking with the captain, he's like, "You have to land this plane in 2 hours." Well, we can't land in 2 hours, or I can't really give you that. Can you? Well, and then Nielsen's character would say, "Can you take a guess? Not for 2 hours." And Leslie Nielsen's like, "You can't take a guess for 2 hours." And he's like, "No, we can't land in 2 hours." And then there's some other stuff whenever Robert Stack's character Kramer comes in, and he has to face these overzealous religious nuts where he's like, "Hey, would you like to donate to the Church of Buddhism or Christianity?" And he starts fighting these people off or something like that, and starts defending them. And it's just hilarious, when he starts to show off his martial arts skills, you name it. And then, gosh, there's some other classical stuff that I should remember. Damn. Oh yeah, the drinking problem. Like, instead of it being a normal drinking problem, he would actually just splash the drink in front of his face or something like that. And then apparently during the flight, apparently when Ted was talking about his past to one of the passengers, he was talking to this one lady, and apparently, I guess because he was talking for so long, it must have bored the hell out of her. And after the aftermath, after the flashback ends, it would show her just like her body was swinging like she hung herself. And then apparently when he was talking to this Japanese general, and by the end of it, he takes like his sword and stabs himself with it. So yeah, just filled with some very funny visual stuff. And then apparently whenever, Steven Stucker's character, where someone was asking him, "Well, can we get some help?" And he was like, "How about Mr. Rogers?" or something like that. And whenever McCroskey shows Jacobs the map, he's like, "Well, what do you make of this?" He's like, "Well, basically, you can make a half, you can make a caboose, or something along those lines," or something like that. So yeah, just filled with some very funny satirical stuff. And then apparently whenever one of the guys goes to get Rex Kramer, there's this dog that kind of humps him, barks at this one dude, and kind of humps at him. And then of course when they're driving, it's like an obvious blue screen, like there's so much stuff behind them, like they hit a bicycle, but it's obviously the footage doesn't really match. And it's kind of funny, like there's horses chasing them from behind or something like that. It's just filled with some visual gags. And gosh, oh yeah, the part whenever Rex Kramer has to first convince Ted to follow his instructions. He's asking about the weather, where basically, because Elaine is his co-pilot, and he basically repeats what he says, and she would repeat back to Kramer about the ice and the weather. And he's like, "Well, it's a damn good thing that he doesn't know I hate his guts." And then she repeats that same exact line to him, and he just looks at her like that. And then whenever they're landing the plane, there's like a whole bunch of sweat dripping from him and stuff like that. And during all this time, like right before the landing happens, Dr. Rumack's character comes in and says, "Well, good luck. I just want to tell you both, good luck. We're all counting on you." And then apparently, even when they're descending even harder, he comes back in and says the same thing. He says, "I want to just to let you know, we wish you good luck. We're both all counting on you." And then even when they land, he even says the same thing again. And gosh, there's so many funny stuff in this movie that I can't believe I don't remember any of this. Like the Jive Lady, and You know, the fact that Lloyd Bridges is getting high, sniffing glue and stuff like that, to where the point where it makes him, like I said before, it makes him jump off. And then apparently, even when the plane's landing, the Stucker character has unplugged something where it's like all the controls are not working. He's like, "Oh, just kidding," and plugs it back in. Oh yeah, and there's that one other funny scene where, man, the fog's getting thicker, and then the Stucker character hops in and says, "And Leon is getting larger." Just so much fun satirical humor. Oh yeah, and one of the autopilot scenes where it's apparently it's a little hot. There's actually a flashing button that says "a little hot." So yeah, I don't know where to say, but I don't know where to start or end. But there's just so much fun-filled stuff. It's unbelievable. And oh yeah, there's a part where I forgot to mention the captain, where he's talking to Joey, where basically he tells him, "Hey, Joey, have you ever seen a grown man naked? I bet you if they had that one line in there in today's film, people would just flip the shit out, because it would be kind of considered like a pedophilic kind of remark." And then of course he still talks to the young kid, where he's like, "Say, Joey, do you like watching gladiators, or ever been in a Turkish prison or something like that?" And the funny thing, like I said before, they just brought these actors in, and they're supposed to play it straight, but they would say, you know, oddball ways of dialogue, which comes across as funny. There's no fart jokes, and well, there's the flagellance reference whenever the captain gets poisoned and whatnot. But yeah, so if y'all haven't seen this film before, you're missing out. It's definitely a fun-filled film. It's very unapologetic, still funny this day. Filled with so many visual puns and gags and slapstick humor that, you know, to this day it still works. You know, it's unfortunate a film like that won't get made today. And yeah, nearly 40 years later, it still holds up well. And this is probably the main reason why Leslie Nielsen would start to do comedy. As for the for the cons of this film, I wouldn't say there's really a whole lot of cons. I think it did its job well. Hell, we get to see the flashbacks of Elaine and Ted's previous relationship. At least it fills out the gaps, and we see why, you know, why their relationship would start to deteriorate, like his drinking problem and the fact that he didn't want to be, you know, being responsible because of what the war did to him. You know, traumatized him to some extent. But you know, it's I don't think there's really much the cons I can say about this, but yeah, and the pros, everyone does a great job. The humor's out there. It just works well. There's great chemistry between our two leads, you know, Robert Hayes and Julie Hagerty, which is why their chemistry was still pretty good in the sequel. But there was definitely some flaws in that film as well, but you know, nothing major. But yeah, I don't know what else to say other than the fact that it's just a fun-filled comedy slapstick film that you're missing out, and you definitely should give it a watch if you haven't seen it. And it's too bad that after, you know, the 80s and early 90s, it seemed like the Zucker brothers seemed to have lost their luster in comedy. So, but still, this film's a classic, and you definitely should check it out. It is on YouTube for rent, but you can also buy it if you've already rented it and you liked it. So yeah. Anywho, I think I'm going to end it here. You'll definitely stay tuned for my next review of the second film, Airplane 2, the sequel, a somewhat underrated sequel, and almost as good as the original. But yeah, if for all the new subs and current subs, hopefully you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and hopefully you'll like my review of the second one. So there you go. All right, I'll see you later, folks. Later.